To no shock at all, the Liberal government's plan to keep jobs in Canada is not working. And as a matter of fact, is actually only making things worse.
I do feel like the communication is a big part of this, George. I interviewed earlier on my radio show the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie, who is literally concerned about the end of the economy in Sault Ste. Marie, because like you're talking about 40% of the workforce there, but the offshoots of that are immeasurable in that community, and he sees the primary solution is essentially around defense procurement. Right, you're trying to basically reorient the entire industry to focus on a domestic market after relying on external markets, namely the United States. His concern is there are no details, and it doesn't feel like it's moving fast, and they can't get information from the government on it. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack here, and I think starting with Sault Ste. Marie, I come from Northern Ontario, so when they ripped up the railway tracks, they ripped my city apart. I also lived a little bit in Sudbury, and similarly, when the mine gets hit hard, that affects the city, because these are good-paying, unionized jobs. So these folks, it's not just their own job. It's they're buying their smokes, they're buying their 4x4s, they're buying the sleds and their boats, and that's what's keeping the economy going. And so it's going to hit hard for sure. I think one of the things you have to question, though, is when you have, it's nice to say that there's a plan and investors are taking confidence in that, but in this case, the plan was to lay off these workers, which is how the loan was guaranteed in the first place. And they obviously don't have a whole lot of faith in the federal government's ability to create a big enough market for them to be able to keep those workers on side. And that's the problem. I mean, the federal government should be at the table saying, look, the market's coming back. Here's our plan. Keep these workers going. We're going to have a market for this steel. And instead, they basically said, okay, the only way you can stay alive is by firing 1,000 people. Cool. Here's $400,000 or $400 million. And that doesn't seem like a sustainable way to keep workers in this country.
Here's the interesting thing. Like the debate, Shakir, has focused on how can you provide any taxpayer money without attaching a conditionality, which we have seen successive governments not do in certain cases, without attaching a conditionality that Canadian jobs need to be protected. What the interview I just conducted with the CEO revealed was basically the business plan was presented to the government, and my understanding is the government needed to know the company would be viable, and part of making the company viable is this transition, which includes 1,000 people losing their job. That was going to happen a couple of years from now or a year from now. It just wasn't going to happen this fast. So I feel like it's the political debate is kind of offside in a little way. That maybe needs to be scrutinized more, but it doesn't look like this was even about whether or not, we can hand them money and they'll guarantee a certain number of jobs. Their contention, the company, is the only way for them to survive is to change the model.
Yeah, I think on the money side of things, I know it's a loan and not just a kind of a direct subsidy, but I think when you see what's happening with Algoma and you saw what happened with Stellantis and a few others, I think if you're just a Canadian taxpayer, you scratch your head. How could the government give these companies money and then either they decide to relocate their operations or they just fire a bunch of workers? It seems like it doesn't make a lot of sense for that process to play itself out. I think moving forward for this government, obviously communications is one thing, but I think results are going to really matter too. You could talk about the Buy Canadian policy and, it's going to work, but it's not working right now. That's why we're seeing a lot of job losses. I think when you're looking at this trade war that we're actually in, the sectors that Donald Trump is targeting, so autos, steel, aluminum, there's going to be some rough times ahead. I was always of the mind that, as long as this trade war dragged on, it would be to our benefit. We always had the logic that, a tariff is a tax on your citizens. So the Americans would, get upset, business would get upset, and they would push Trump to kind of reverse these tariffs. But I think when you're talking about the sectors in Canada right now with steel and especially autos, that doesn't look like it's going to happen in the near term. And I'm not sure how this government gets out of it. The only way that I can see anything being a plus here is if they can negotiate with something with Donald Trump to reduce these tariffs. And where we sit right now, it looks extremely unlikely that that's going to be a possibility in the near term.
Yeah, to be fair, the stuff that the government is doing, the industry, Laura, seems very supportive of. It's just not, they want it to be bigger and faster, but at the same time, none of that stuff, you can't create a domestic, defense procurement base or a defense industrial base overnight. So to Shakir's point, there is a lot of pain in the interim, and a lot of pressure on the prime minister as he heads to Washington again, with it seems like even the possibility of a sectoral deal now far out of sight.
Yes, I think that is the struggle for the Liberal government, that these changes to Canada's trade policies cannot be shifted overnight. And that is what the election campaign was fought on. And perhaps there are some tough questions now for for the prime minister on whether he overpromised and underdelivered at this point in the game. I think kind of the challenge for the other political parties right now is, what are their solutions to get us out of this that is kind of not what the Liberal government is doing, right? I mean, the government has announced new measures to kind of punish foreign steel. They're trying to prop up the Canadian industry. That is sort of the message that we're hearing from the other parties, and there's no quick fix here. So while there might be a lot of criticism and scrutiny on the Liberals, as there should be, and a lot of pressure on Prime Minister Carney, I'm not sure that any of the other parties have presented a solution to the public that solves all of this, right? And that's the challenge in a lot of these situations, which are different, right? As you mentioned, the Algoma Steel situation is not just because of the tariffs. They had a long-term plan to do this. It has been expedited because of the situation in the United States, and the Liberals are in power right now and they have to answer to it. But I think that what's kind of keeping potentially the Prime Minister afloat in the public opinion, as he is potentially still viewed as kind of the most trusted negotiator and representative of Canada. Whether that will change now, whether the impatience will start to grow as the trade war drags on, and we'll see what happens with the renegotiation of the CUSMA deal next year. I mean, that will potentially be much more difficult for him. But I think right now, I mean, no one has presented a clean solution for the public that solves all of these job losses and issues that Canada is facing right now.
Things are only going to get worse when this CUSMA negotiation comes around. Just think of how bad it's been with the tariffs. If you think CUSMA is going to go any smoother, you've got another thing coming. And it really sounds like the government's current plan is to just throw millions of dollars at companies and hope they figure it out on their own time. And I feel like I need to point out, each and every time Poilievre speaks, he lays out a solid plan. The only issue is he would need a majority to execute it. And right now, it's pretty much up in the air in terms of who would win the next election. Anyway, I would like to know what you think down in the comment section below, and have a good one.